Hi guys, welcome back to the DeFi series. So in this video, we'll talk about the core primitives and DeFi, and these are the basic building blocks that form the foundation of DeFi. So let's get started. So the core primitives are stable coins, lending and borrowing, liquidity pools, and decentralized exchanges. Now let's deep dive into each of them. So the first primitive is stable coins. So let's first understand what do we mean by stable coins. So as the name suggests, stable coin is a cryptocurrency whose value is kept stable. And how we do that? By pegging it to another asset. And this asset could be anything. It could be a fiat currency, it could be a commodity, or it could be another cryptocurrency. And based on how we are pegging it, are different categories of stable coins defined. So the stable coins they provide an alternative to the high volatility of the crypto market. And due to this reason, they serve as a medium of exchange. And they truly form the bridge between the fiat currency and the cryptocurrency. And by fiat currency, I mean the traditional currency that has been issued and maintained by governments like US dollars, Indian rupees, and euros. It first appeared in 2014 and it has been growing since then. Now let's understand why stablecoins are so important. Even though all these cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum are so popular, they have volatility in their price, due to which they cannot be used for day to day transactions. So that's why we need something which is having stable value, and that's how stable coins came into picture. Now let's see what are some of the use cases for stable coins. So it could be on ramping to DeFi, then we use it for payments, for cross-border payments, foreign exchange, and also the store of value among in economic instability or inflation. And if you see in this diagram, this is the average supply of stable coins in circulation, which is increasing year on year by 28%, with 208 billion being estimated in 2025. And the total volume that the stable coins have surpassed in 2024 increased the combined volume of MasterCard and Visa. So that's how crucial the stable coins are. It's very clearly seen from the numbers that they're truly shining. So now let's understand what are the different categories of stable coins. So there are four categories. The first is the fiat backed stable coin. So as the name suggests, it's backed by a fiat. So it's mapped one to a traditional currency like US dollars or euros. And this is like the most popular type of stable coin. To give you an example, we have USDT by Tether and USDC by Circle. Then the second category is commodity based stablecoin. In this case, the stablecoin is tied to a commodity, which is gold, silver, or oil. And these stablecoins allow users to get exposure to these commodities without owning them directly. Some of these examples are the Pax Gold and the Tether Gold, which maps back to gold. And the third type is the crypto backed stablecoin, which is backed by another cryptocurrency. And in this case, since the backing is by another cryptocurrency, we often use over collateralization. So, to give you an example, we have this Makers DAO token called DAI, which has been rebranded to Sky USD, which is backed by ETH and various other crypto. And the fourth and the last type is the algorithmic stablecoin, where it's not backed by any asset as such, but we have this strategy of keeping the stablecoin's value stable by controlling its supply through the means of an algorithm. Some of the examples are the Ampleforth's AMPL token, the Frax token, and the Athena's USDE token. And in the past, there has been attempt to make algorithmic stablecoins work, but we have seen some major failures by Terra's USD. So still the work is ongoing for the algorithmic stablecoins. So now we understand stablecoins in depth. Let's move on to the next. primitive, which is lending and borrowing. So, lending and borrowing is very similar to how we do it in the traditional finance space. So, in this case, we have people who are lenders, and what I mean by that is they are depositors, like they have extra funds and they want to earn interest on top of their funds. The other side, we have borrowers, as you can see in the diagram here. So, these borrowers are interested in taking loans and they are agreeing to pay interest on the amount they borrowed. And the condition is they'll get the loan immediately, how it is in the normal traditional space. And in this case, if you see, the lending and borrowing has been done traditionally in the finance space by financial institutions, and DeFi allows us to do lending and borrowing in a manner which is completely decentralized and permissionless, while the users still maintaining full custody of their coins. So, to give you an example of these platforms, we have Aave and Compound, which we will deep dive in later sections. So, one important thing to note here is if I'm a borrower and I want to take a loan, I need to provide the cryptocurrency as collateral, and the cryptocurrency that I provide will not be in a 1:1 ratio. So, what I mean by that is I need to provide more currency, more tokens than I need to take loan from. And why we do that? We do it to mitigate the risk, and this is called over collateralization. So, in case you might be wondering, okay, I need $100 worth of ETH and I'm supplying, let's say, $150 of ETH. Why will I do that in first place? Why can't I directly sell my ETH? So, there are a number of reasons why people don't do it. One of them could be they still want to hold the cryptocurrency they might believe in. The second reason could be they are borrowing because maybe they want to take some leverage on their current position. Or the other reason could be they want to avoid or they want to delay in capital taxes on their tokens. So, these are some of the things where such a scenario will occur and users might be interested in taking a loan. And in case you might be wondering, like, what is this limit? So, the borrowing limit is there and has been set by protocols. If you go through Compound and Aave, you will see most of the cases the loan to value ratio is 80%. And this is what we call the collateral factor. And what I mean by that is if I have $100 worth of money in collateral, I can take loan of $80 worth of money. So that's how the current DeFi lending and borrowing market work. The other question that might be popping your head is the interest rate in the centralized finance is being defined by governments, how it is done here. So the interest that lenders receive and the interest that borrowers have to pay are determined by how much tokens are there in a particular market for both supplying and borrowing. So that's how it is being done, and then we don't have any middlemen doing or changing the interest rate. I hope you understand lending and borrowing. Now let's move on to the next primitive, which is liquidity pools. Before understanding what are liquidity pools, let's understand what do we mean by liquidity. Liquidity means how easily one can buy or sell an asset without affecting its price. In other words, it means what is the availability of buyers and sellers to make a trade happen in a smooth manner. So, where does this liquidity comes from in traditional market? In traditional finance, this liquidity comes from market makers. Now, let's understand what are these market makers. Market makers are the entities that are always willing to buy or sell these assets so they can make the trade happen. And in this case, the users don't have to wait for anybody else. The market maker's role is to ensure that the trade happens smoothly. In the case of DeFi, since we don't have a central authority, the funds need to come from somewhere else, right? And that's where the liquidity pools comes into picture. The liquidity pool is basically a pool or a collection of tokens that are logged in a smart contract on blockchain. And these pools enable us to do trading, and the liquidity pool are being used in Texas. We will see how it is being used in some time. So, this concept of liquidity pool was first introduced by Banker, but it got famous by Uniswap. Now, we understand what are these liquidity pools. You might be wondering, like, why do we need these liquidity pools? So, these liquidity pools enable us to ensure liquidity in the DeFi space without using order books. They also ensure that the liquidity is decentralized because the liquidity is locked in a smart contract, and these smart contracts are open source. Anybody can read it. Then the third major thing that they ensure is related to the constant availability, because this liquidity is through the liquidity pools. We are not relying on direct users. They are open 24/7 globally. And they also enable new markets because anybody can list their tokens into these liquidity pools. And whosoever participates in the liquidity pools, we incentivize them. So this keeps a sustainable way of providing liquidity in the DEX space. Now, let's see how these liquidity pools work. So, we have people who are interested in providing liquidity. These are called liquidity providers. Let's take an example of a very basic liquidity pool where we have two assets. Let's say we have ETH and DAI. So these liquidity providers, they supply the equal values of these two tokens in a liquidity pool. And in this case, a smart contract uses some formula to determine the price of each of the assets. So let's say in this case, when someone swaps ETH for DAI, what they do is they add ETH to the pool and they take out DAI, which makes the supply in the pool change. So we'll get into the details of it in later section. Essentially, what happens here is the liquidity providers they earn a small fees as a reward in proportion to the share they have in the pool. So when somebody deposits the liquidity, they get the LP token that represents their proportion of the share of the pool, depending on which the reward is being given to them. So that's how liquidity pools work. I hope it's clear. So now let's move on to the next primitive, which is decentralized exchanges. So with decentralized exchanges, you might be wondering, we already have these centralized exchanges like Binance and Coinbase. So why do we need to come up with another exchange? So the idea is, in case of centralized exchanges, what happens is your assets are being held by the exchange. It's in their wallet. And if something happens on the exchange, let's say tomorrow the exchange gets hacked or the exchange goes bankrupt, like how it happened in the case of WazirX hacking or how it happened with the case of FTX. So your funds will get stolen, or if funds you won't have access to your funds. So this is why the DEXs come into picture, because it ensures that you have the control and custody over your assets. And as they say, not your key, not your crypto. So that's one of the major reasons. And then we have trust and transparency indexes, because everything is done using smart contracts. And these smart contracts are in open source and audited, and they are running on public blockchain. The third reason why DEXs are so important is the censorship resistance. So, with centralized exchange, what can happen is they can blacklist certain users depending on their geography. But with decentralized exchanges, you simply need an internet connection and a wallet, and then you're good to go. The next important point is, like, there are a lot of projects that are emerging, and let's say if you're a protocol who wants to launch a token on any of the centralized exchange, then you need to pay a hefty fees. And it depends on the centralized exchange whether they want to list you or not. But in the case of decentralized exchange, anybody can list their own tokens and it's available to everybody for trading. The another major aspect of decentralized exchanges, it ensures privacy. So if If you might have used a centralized exchange like Binance or Coinbase, you might have noticed that they require you to do KYC. What it means is your identity is being tied to whatever you're doing on the platform. But in case of DEXs, our identity is not tied. We have a wallet, which is how we are mapped to the network, but it ensures pseudo-anonymity. These are the reasons why decentralized exchanges are needed. And now, if you're wondering if the decentralized exchanges are having lots of advantages, then why are centralized exchanges still operating? So, there are certain things that centralized exchanges do very well. First is the speed and the efficiency. Since the centralized exchanges perform these trades off chain, like in case of centralized exchange, nothing is happening on the blockchain, it makes the trades faster and cheaper than most exchanges. The second point that is very good about centralized exchanges is the liquidity. The liquidity is deeper in the centralized exchanges, and then the user experience is good because you can get easily onboarded to the centralized exchanges. And you also have this concept of customer support in centralized exchanges, which is not there in DEXs because you don't have any person to manage anything. It's just you, and the trade is happening between all the users. So there are certain trade-offs between both of these centralized and decentralized exchanges. It's up to us to decide what do we need. If we want control, transparency, and freedom at the cost of higher fees or complexity, we should go with DEXs. And I believe DEXs is something that we should move forward to because privacy is something that all of us should take very seriously. Now, we understand why do we need DEXs and what it is. Now let's talk about the two types of DEXs models. So one is the AMM model. AMM stands for Automated Market Makers. So this AM DEX, it uses the liquidity pools that we just talked about. And this AMM DEXs, they use some sort of mathematical formula which helps in determining the price of the assets based on the supply in a given liquidity pool. And this AMM works on smart contracts. This concept of AMM was introduced in 2018 by Uniswap. So some of the popular DEXs that utilize AMM are Uniswap and Curve. Then the second model is the order book. This mimics what we are doing in the traditional exchanges and what we are doing in the stock market. It maintains a list of buy and sell orders, and then we match them directly on the basis of the price and the time. In case of order book dexes, we have two modes of operating. The one is it can be fully on chain, like the orders are stored and matched on blockchain. So there is this protocol called Serium on Solana, which is on chain order book. And then we have like a hybrid mode. What it means is we try to do the order book off chain and then we do the settlement on chain. So there is this 0x protocol which implements this hybrid mode. So that's how the order book dexes work. Majorly, you will see dexes being using AMM. With this, we are done with the core primitives in DeFi. If this was useful, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.